I just finished watching a series on Netflix called Wild Wild Country. It is a documentary about the Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh and his commune, cult, whatever you want to call it, that he established in Oregon in the 80s. For those of you who don't remember the story, in the early 80s, this Indian guru called Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh came to the United States and tried to set up a commune or something. They were never quite clear what it was, in Oregon, near a town called Antelope, which had a population of, I think, under 100 people. When the people in Antelope, Oregon started to get upset by some of the Rajneeshi things they were doing, like a lot of free sex and yelling and weird shit going on, the Rajneeshis bought a bunch of property in the town of Antelope and thereby established themselves as voters and voted that the town change its name to Rajneesh and become governed by them. And they set up their own mayor and all this other stuff. When this was not quite enough, they decided they needed to take over the entire county that their place was in. And so they bussed in thousands of homeless people and made them Rajneeshis, hoping that they would boost their voter numbers and be able to vote themselves into governing the entire county. When this was not working, they hatched a plan to poison a bunch of salad bars in one of the towns in the county with salmonella poisoning, and thereby make a bunch of people sick so they wouldn't vote and have their own people vote. That didn't work out very well either. It became the largest case of bioterrorism ever in the United States. Let's hope it remains the biggest one. Eventually, the Rajneesh was charged and fined and left the country. He blamed his secretary, Ma Anand Sheela, who was this woman who probably hatched the specific plans, though it's really hard to believe that Rajneesh didn't know anything about what was going on. So later on, he got into Zen after all this happened and rebranded himself Osho, which means honored priest, and started publishing books under that name, and eventually he died when he was 58. They don't really mention that in the documentary, how young he was when he died, because it's real suspicious how he died, and I think that fits in with what I want to say about the whole thing. One of the aspects of this story that isn't really addressed in the documentary is why everybody was so gaga over this Rajneesh dude. They don't really give you much of his teachings and stuff or anything to kind of indicate why everybody's so amazed by him. They're just talking about his energy and giving you wide googly eyes and going, oh, he's just so wonderful. But they don't tell you why. I haven't ever read a Rajneesh or an Osho book cover to cover, but I've skimmed them from time to time because it's something I'm interested in. I've even got one on my shelf. It's Dogen by Osho Rajneesh. I don't know. There's probably too much glare for you to see it, but trust me, that's what it is. And in here, on the inner flap, it says, Dogen is saying that forms do not change into other forms. Winter remains winter. Summer remains summer, but something inner moves from one climate to another climate, which is beyond birth and beyond death, which is beyond life, which simply is. You can give it any shape, any form, but you cannot take away its isness. This isness is the greatest discovery of the East. The West has missed it completely. And that quote from Rajneesh on his understanding of Dogen is kind of typical. What I get when I have read any of Rajneesh or Osho's work is he kind of reminds me of a band in which they kind of play songs in which their influences are really obvious, but they don't quite know how to make it into their own thing. Like they do a pastiche that sounds kind of like I Am the Walrus with Jimi Hendrix's solo from Purple Haze in the middle of it or something like that, but they don't really understand Jimi Hendrix or the Beatles. That's what you get when you read Rajneesh, or at least that's what I get. He seems to read a lot of stuff, but he doesn't really understand it. And he when you see him on video, he just has this kind of stare that I guess looks spiritual to people who don't know what spirituality is, and kind of fits a stereotype. You know, he has a big long beard, he has this little funny hat, he has these weird clothes with giant shoulder pads. You know, he looks like a spiritual guy, and everybody just went gaga for him. But maybe the point is, it may not have mattered at all what he was teaching. I'm not sure anybody was really listening. He's one of these guys who will say, I am nothing special. I am just an ordinary person. I'm just telling the truth. But it's all bullshit, because if he was really just an ordinary person, he wouldn't be demanding all this worship and allowing all this worship and 20 Rolls Royces and a big commune and all these people and all this stuff and all that. It doesn't. So what he says is kind of irrelevant. The dynamic there is that people kind of give you worship and praise and all of this stuff. If you're a guru type, if you're the kind of person who does basically the sort of thing I do, they'll give you all this praise and stuff in order to try to get something from you. So they want to control you. So you get this weird dynamic, and everybody who gets into this and starts a cult or whatever, they think that they're going to be the one person who manages to get it right, even though everybody else who's tried it has made a shit show of it. They think they're going to get it right. That they're going to start this movement that's going to fix the world's problems and bring everybody to the higher plane of enlightenment or whatever the hell it is they want to do, and it's all going to work out right. Well, it never does. I think a lot of people's image of how this works is kind of from Wizard of Oz, from the movie Wizard of Oz, not the books. Apparently the books are much more complex, but in the movie, they kill the Wicked Witch, and then everybody is free and goes ding dong, the witch is dead, and everything that was bad that they ever did was because of the Wicked Witch, and now that she's gone, they're going to be good again. Bullshit. It's people are looking for an excuse to run rampant with whatever thing it is, and Rajneesh was giving them permission to run rampant with sex and violence and all sorts of other stuff that they wanted to do anyway, and they could kind of all put the blame on him, and then he could put the blame on Mana and Sheila, and everybody else could go, oh, they did it. That's not really how it works. So I don't think it matters what Rajneesh had to say, even if he was saying the best things in the world, which he wasn't. It wouldn't have mattered, because he allowed this thing to occur, which is that group around him, where everybody goes, oh, that guy, he's the one. So this guy takes on everything for the sake of the group, and they all get to do, they basically abdicate all personal responsibility and give it up to the great leader. And people try to do this to me fairly regularly, not every day, not every month, maybe a few times a year, though. Somebody will come up to me and try to do this. I had one incident where I was leading a retreat, and this guy came and he gave me this really sad story about his life and all these things he had to do, and I'm not going to tell you the details because I don't want to identify the guy, but it was pretty bad what he'd gone through and what he was dealing with at the moment. And then he's all going, and I want you to be my teacher. I want to learn from you to how to master my own, I don't know what he said, something like that. But he gave me those eyes. I was like, I learned from you. And I didn't like it. It was a little creepy, but he'd had such a hard life. I said, okay, we'll work something out. This is years ago. We'll work something out, and we'll make you my student, and we'll, figure it out. A few weeks later, I wrote a little bit about this on my blog, again being really, really careful not to identify the guy. And I wasn't even telling this part of the story about him going, with the puppy dog eyes and I want to be your teacher. This whole thing. And the guy went on the blog and just went nutso squirrely on me, like, you've embarrassed me in public and you're a bad person, you're horrible. I don't remember all he said, but it upset me at the time. because at the same time this was happening, a friend of mine was dying of cancer, and I was dealing with that. And then I have to look on my blog, and this guy's blowing up on me, and I'm the worst person in the world for exposing him, and I don't know what else he was saying. And so I saw what was going on. What he really wanted was someone to control, someone he could. So he was going to dominate me by being my servant. And this is what happens. This is what always happens in these situations. It never works out right. And that's what you get with the Rajneesh. And I would highly recommend this documentary, Wild Wild Country, and it's on Netflix, and they are not giving me any money to say that. I just really like it. So thank you. And if you want to give me the money that Netflix would have given me for advertising their show, or if you are Netflix and you want to give me some money for advertising your show, there are links below to my Patreon page and my PayPal. That is how I make my living, basically. I make a certain amount off of books and public speaking, but it's not enough to cover my rent. The rest of it, in fact, the bulk of it, comes from you guys donating your $5 and $1 and $10. That's great. Thanks a lot. See you next time.